Hello, I'm Nicole Bradford, SHRM's Executive in Residence for AI+HI. For this episode, we're coming to you live from the AI+HI Project 2025 in San Francisco. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're exploring how generative AI is reshaping the HR profession, from real-time learning and knowledge access to intelligent automation. Our guest this week is Guillermo Miranda, co-founder of Atlas Copilot and one of the speakers at our event this year. Welcome to the AI+HI Project, Guillermo, or G.
G, yeah, that's easier. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Very pleased to be here.
So I love to start podcasts with just a little bit of background. In your career, you've led major learning and leadership initiatives at Boeing and IBM. What led you to step into the startup space and build an AI platform for HR professionals?
Curiosity, the opportunity to build something yourself, and the ability to be close to the leading edge. So I started my professional life as a lawyer. I work as a lawyer, then I did an MBA, then I evolved more in talent management, business development, marketing communications. Back in Boeing, I was the talent person. And then we said, let's do something different. And an AI startup is a good thing to learn and to create opportunities for HR, I think.
So you've worked at the intersection of people development and digital transformation for years. How has that shaped your perspective on how HR needs to evolve in the age of AI?
Well, very clearly, we have to solve the people equation in how we are going to look into the future, how we are going to recreate the future. Generative AI is basically a general purpose technology. So what is starting to happen is business models are changing, ways of working are changing, expectations of outcome are changing. The human of the equation needs to take a different responsibility, a different role, evolve the way that we manage the workplace. So having the opportunity to be part of that evolution, be part of that is important. And coming from the software side with a heavy HR background helps because you are not relying on the technology. Technology is fantastic, but you are relying on your knowledge of what is needed.
That's a good segue into the idea of a co-pilot for HR. And especially since you're coming from that deep understanding of what is needed, how would you describe for our audience the concept of like what is a co-pilot for HR and what does it change about how people are going to do their work in an HR function today?
Well, AI can help us to do many things. Let's start with basics of what it means performance. Performance, there is basic performance, and it's all about focus and productivity. There is collaborative performance, and it is about how you interact and how you orchestrate a team. And there is innovative performance. There is breakthrough performance. It's how you reinvent the future. The role of HR and the role of a copilot can help us in these three stages. First, improving productivity, helping us to do the boring, repetitive things better, faster, with less errors, and liberating time for us to be on the business side of adding value. On the collaborative side, what we need to do is to rethink who is doing what and how we orchestrate the collaboration, as I mentioned. In that sense, AI will help us to give us insights, will inform with data our decision, will collaborate as a probably one more digital worker that is part of a team. And then the third side is how we can reimagine what we have been doing. This morning in the conversation, we said, okay, think about academia, think about universities, how you are going to assess people in the new world. And my comment is maybe that's the wrong answer because probably you don't need to assess people anymore the way that you thought. Now what we need to think, this is not about knowledge transfer. This is about building knowledge. So you become a builder of knowledge as part of your university experience. Then there is no need for assessment. There is need for testing. There is need for deploying what you have built. So I think that's the Copilot in HR will do all these things. And it will do it in different speeds, probably. Context is very important. Different industries is very important, highly regulated, less regulated. We'll see the change. It's already happening. We are seeing that in the marketplace today.
One of the things that I think is important about what you just broke down is that a lot of times when people think about AI, they think it's all one thing. And so they think that, GPTs are the same as an LLM, is the same as a RAG, like they think it's all the same thing. And also, I think, now that, all of humanity, especially all of, people who work in organizations are learning to use AI, is that there's different ways that AI can support different tasks, and there's different AIs for different tasks. We're about to get into a level of granularity on things. And I think you kind of spoke to that with these three baskets
Yes.
of how one might use AI.
Exactly. It it depends on the context. It depends on what you want to accomplish, and it also is very important the human ingenuity behind to be sure that you are not painting everything blue. Say, oh, let's put AI. Well, that's not the right statement. You have to think of how we do this thing in a better way, how we increase our performance stage by stage, and when is the right moment to do it.
And I also really love the third bucket, which is about that very revolutionary thing. So it's like the first bucket is just how do you do the work that you have to do anyway in a better way. That second bucket is more evolutionary. So, how do you do things in a better way? But then that last bucket it feels like it's revolutionary, doing things completely different because AI gives you a new insight. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, our business models are based on the output that we want. So the role of human resources is precisely to understand how people will make these things happen. Okay, and let's say that we are in the business, in a retail business. Uh, the role of a retail clerk has evolved really dramatically, even if you don't perceive it, because the role 10 years ago was to showcase the product. Is This is what it does, this is what it can do for you, etc. And this is the pricing, and we can do this offer. Now, when somebody comes to a face-to-face situation, you know everything about the product because you already did your research, or the company targeted this specific person with the information. So the role of the retail is not to convince you, is not to explain you, is to help you to make a decision. Ideally, in the moment, is to help you to understand what else is needed to make the buying decision, right? So that means you need to hire people that is probably more assertive. You need to hire people that is able to understand and have this sense of which is the right button to start pushing with different buyers. And this can be applicable in any kind of retail. Uh, I am part of the science board of Better App, and we're working with Chanel. And Chanel is a very high-end retail. You can spend $1,000 with a couple of items. Easy, yes. Easy. Probably more than that. But then the value of how you facilitate the decision making is very high. So you need to enable your people different, and you need to give them the tools of what is happening around. So I think that's the breakthrough of how we reinvent things.
And that leads to my next question, which is about, so in the case of Atlas Copilot, it combines expert insights and personalized learning and intelligent automation. And you just gave a case where what an organization needs from a particular type of employee is changing. So could you speak to how sort of a hybrid approach of these three things improves decision making for HR as they're staffing different functions?
Yes. So look, when we see things like a process, which has been the traditional way to work in HR, we drive processes, we ensure compliance, we ensure fairness, and but basically sequential. Okay. So when you have a tool like Atlas or any other intelligent generative AI tool as part of the workflow of human resources, what you are doing is actually to run in parallel several of the steps that traditionally have been sequential. So I will get the insights, I will get the proposal, I will get the market comparison all at the same time. I can do the deep research. So I don't need to have this sequential. And then I can get also the facilitation of what is happening around me to make that decision. Okay? So you shortcut the research part, accelerate the research part. You get insights from what is happening around in a way that is easy to digest. You understand what is the business consequence of that decision. You can even do a little of simulation and say, please help me to run this simulation. And it will not require a big investment on an actuary to do a reasonable simulation of something. So Atlas is allowing you, is an advisor that enhance your capability to make decisions, providing the information, the data, the comparisons, and with a quick component of productivity. You can upload a file and ask to be refined. You can upload a CV and say, help me to create an interview guide. Those little things that immediately add value to your day-to-day. And then you are working differently. And that's the piece that is more important. It's not the tooling, but it's how you are doing the role differently and how you are getting a broader understanding of what happened. In a process world, you do one by one. In a generative AI environment, you can do simultaneous things.
I just started working with a tool called Clay, which is sort of like a database builder. And the workflow is entirely different than how you would do it before. And it takes a minute to realize that it's different and to really use it. But it's one of those things that it's like mind blowing because normally if you wanted to build a list, you would, build the list and then you would slowly fill in pieces of it. But with this, you sort of start with an intention and it builds out from there. Like it grows like that as opposed to in columns, and it's a very different way of doing things. So what about the people who are scared or resistant to this? I've heard that you have an amazing story about someone who was presented with change and how they approached it. Would you share that story with our audience?
Absolutely. Look, let's do the following exercise. We are going to translate ourselves to a small town in the south of Italy, Calabria specifically, and we will see a family house on vacation where grandma is the master coffee maker in the mornings. And she uses the traditional way of doing coffee. She has this French press machine. She has the Italian coffee maker, depending on the audience. And she enjoys being the center of the attention. And you get amazing coffee, by the way, to start your day in front of the beach. And then there is Christmas. And there is one of these sons of grandma, a high-power executive from Milan that has no better idea than go and acquire the latest version of a big coffee machine that is fully automated and shows up on Christmas and say, Mama, here is your future. So grandma gets really disappointed because you are taking my job out and you are bringing this complicated machine into the equation. But grandma has a granddaughter that says, "Don't worry, grandma. Look, it's not that difficult, and let's work step by step. First, the machine will not choose the coffee, so you still need to be sure that you have the best combination of the grains and the to be transformed into amazing coffee. Second, the machine will not choose the milk and the experience. And by the way, instead of just ristrettos, you can do not flat whites, you can do cappuccinos, double cappuccinos, you can do many things. Try it. Mama is reluctant, grandma is reluctant initially. But then she realized that actually, yes, it helps. It creates, it open opportunities. And so now we move forward to the following summer and we find grandma being the center of attention for the family breakfast again, because she can prepare all this variety of drinks. And by the way, she's now the town barista because all the girlfriends come for coffee and she can demonstrate the ability of manage this big machine. Uh, so it's how you perceive change instead of a threat as an opportunity, and how you have to reinvent yourself to enjoy the opportunity.
Were you the one who bought the coffee machine?
No. Well, in that scenario, I may be one of the potential people that will create a disruption, but no, I was.
Well, what I love about this story is that grandma's ultimate, her ultimate enjoyment of being able to create an experience for her family, that all stays the same. It's just the tools change a bit. And what you said about how we perceive change and reinvent ourselves, that leads me to the next question, which is, we know that HR is going to change. And so looking ahead, how do you see AI transforming HR into a more strategic function, beyond operations and compliance, which, many people think of HR as, towards business leadership in more ways? What do you see happening?
Well, I see happening, this is an opportunity for HR to collaborate differently, okay? And again, it depends on the context, it depends on the industry, it depends on the cultural norm. But in general, it's clearly an opportunity for HR to collaborate differently and show up differently. First, because the component of success to reinvent a business model requires the right leadership, and HR is at the core of how we create leaders, how we develop leaders, how we work on the mindset. It requires the right cultural environment. It requires this operating system that nobody knows, but it works. And HR is right there helping to create the culture, the ingredients, tweaking different ingredients, moving compensation, moving the incentives. All of that creates culture. So you have the leadership, you have the culture, and then what you need is a workforce that is open to change, that is agile, that has this brain plasticity to accept that there is going to be uncertainty, that I can accept that I could run risk, that will be controlled, that I may fail. So there is a piece of workforce engagement and workforce attitude and mindset. And HR is right there as well. So the role of orchestrator of the new world is in front of us. We can take it or we can sit. So you can be the pilot on driving this change, or you can be a passenger, a victim of how all of these things happen. I think that HR is ready to take the role of pilot, is ready to take the role of orchestrating this change with the business leadership. Now, it requires also a deeper understanding of the business, because tweaking with the business models, you need to understand what are the levers that you have to move on the business equation to improve performance, to improve profitability. So HR needs to understand that and be behind. It's an opportunity.
Yeah, one of the ways I've heard it described that builds on what you said is that for all of us, whether we're whatever function we're in, it's basically going from, playing the violin to being a conductor. We're all going to be moving from playing instruments to conducting orchestras, and to understand that and see that. So is that what most excites you about what an HR or enabled HR AI enabled organization could become? Like what's the most exciting part to you?
Well, I think the most exciting part is how we are recreating a core part of society. So, in a society that is market driven, organizations are the core of how we create value. Okay. And if we are able to influence how value is created in these organizations, for profit, non for profit, public sector, at the end, these are organizations that are part of the society. So we spend hours and hours of our life in the core of organizations where we work. So if we are able to influence that and help to recreate the future of society, that's what excites me. And that's what made me choose to have more of a portfolio life and be in the places that make impact. So rethinking the cultural part, reimagine the technology support, having the right fairness, comparison, rewards strategy.
That is exactly the reason why I'm working with SHRM. Exactly that, because organizations are representative of society. And what's happening right now is all of humanity is learning how we work and live and evolve and co-pilot with these tools. And organizations, because of market forces and a variety competition, a variety of other things, they're forced to explore. So it's like these, you know, our companies today are really laboratories for all of humanity. And I believe, and we're going to see lots of different versions because there's going to be different types of organizations. On one side, you'll have the Klarnas of the world, where the CEO says, well, I might even be replaceable. And then on the other hand, you'll have the NVIDIAs of the world, where Jensen Huang says, I'm not replacing any of my people. We're going to completely enable everyone with agents so we can do more. We can do more. We have so much more to do. And so, we're going to see all different types. But I think that's going to be that's how society is going to learn. Humanity is going to learn. What are the ways to do this? And so I agree with you. So we're
Well aligned.
motivated in the exact same way. So we hear a lot about AI helping HR teams do more with less. But how do we ensure that it helps them do things better, not just faster? And what does that look like for coaching or learning?
Well, first is a tricky question because I think it's not just about coaching and learning. I think that you have to see the full life cycle of the employee life cycle, the talent management life cycle. Uh, one of the things that I mentioned this morning as well is if we embrace this opportunity coming from the traditional lenses of HR, of functional expertise, and say, this is talent acquisition, this is talent development, this is total rewards, this is benefits, this is employee relations, we are going to miss the boat. Instead, I think we need to swap and say, what is the perception of the user, the employee, the workforce? So, how I improve engagement, how I facilitate achievement, how I create opportunities and career, because that's what the workforce perceives. They don't perceive the departments of HR. They perceive how this influence you.
Yeah, they never say, oh, today is my day to talk to talent or learning and development. They're just like, how do I get to the next level?
Exactly.
How do I learn what I need to do?
Yes. And the business as well, they don't see this as processes of sequential things. What they see is how do I get the right talent at the right moment, at the right price, in the right place, right? So I think that the opportunity for HR with AI is to have a reshaping of how we do things. Is the catalyzer. Let's do a very simple example to understand what that means. For years, the business of having a circus was based on the clouds, the animals, and what you bring to the crowds. And then you have a Canadian crazy guy that says, no, I'm going to do this around music and stories. Oh, no, that's not circus. Yeah, this is circus. And it's called Circo de Soleil, the most
Successful
successful
circus in the
circus.
history of the world.
Exactly. Because he was brave enough to say, no, this is not, we will do it differently. Because at the end, what we want is to create a sensation in the people. We don't need the lions or the elephants to create that, or the clouds only. You need to orchestrate differently.
And so, keeping with that, when we're thinking about these deeply human moments, so, grandma being the creating experiences for her family, or a circus where it's really about awe and no elephants required.
Or aqua, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're thinking about scalable AI and these deeply human moments, how do we balance between that, especially in talent development or leadership support? How do we know what do we use AI for and what do we keep human?
I think that what we need to evaluate is what is the outcome that we want. Okay? And based on that outcome that we are looking for, we need to see, okay, how we create that outcome. And these are the toolings that we have. How we combine these tools in order to create that outcome in a not just better, faster, but in a smarter way. And that is where you make the decision and says, look, in order to create this outcome, this is the best way to combine the different components. And then you go very convinced and you fail. And you try it again. Okay. So I think this is the mindset of iteration, the mindset of what is the final outcome that we want, instead of the mindset of process and sequential building that is much more monolithic. And, oh no, I already have the policy, don't change it. And say, well, maybe you don't need a policy. So what is the policy for going to the office? There are companies that say there is no policy. It's your common sense. So start treating our workforce as adults. And in other contexts, yes, if you are in a context of retail, you're in a context of different things, you need to have a little bit more of guardrails around.
So since launching Atlas Copilot, what have you learned about what HR professionals actually need when using AI that surprised you?
They need encouragement. I think that the thing that surprised me the most is we need to have this little push, this little nudging, this little, okay, let's do it. It's not that hard. No, it's like, again, I think that most of the people knows how to ride a bike. And all of us starting to ride a bike have accidents. You have to be careful. You have to do it in a controlled environment. But we have to be willing to have that initial little glitch, little failure, learn from that, try again. So I think that the most important part is encouragement, empowerment, and a safe space to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Trying and retrying and learning is what creates the best potential outcome later. And that's what we need as HR professionals, that encouragement.
Yeah. One of the things that excites me the most about AI, especially for HR professionals, is that, often what I find, I tell people at our events and our audience is that there are no experts. So there's AI experts who are doing who are doing algorithms and that kind of thing. But as it relates to a specific company, what is appropriate for that company, that culture, that customer, and someone's particular department and team is very specialized. And so when people talk about, AI wrapper organizations and things like that, it's basically, it doesn't become valuable until it gets applied. And the people outside the organization who are at the big companies, the really large companies that are doing the general models. They might be experts there, but they are not experts on your company, your culture, your strategy, your department. And so the whole world is learning what that means. And so on that level, there are no experts. It might as well be you. Like it could be you. You could be the expert. Just lean in and you start working on it. Try the different tools. Get the Atlas Copilot. Get this Copilot. Do that. And it's that individual HR leader who's going to understand in this culture, this company, this context, this department, here's how we can create value and experimenting. And it's kind of exciting. It feels very freeing. And often when I have this conversation, there's this moment where you see people realize like, oh, it
Yeah.
might as well be me. And because there's a sense sometimes I think where people feel like they don't know enough and that they don't have the credentials to do it. But because we're all learning it together, all the credentials you need are that you know the company, you know the culture, you know the context. And if you know the business outcomes and the strategy, like you talked about at the top of our conversation, then, you can be the one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I love that positioning because it goes to the core of what we are saying. We should not expect to be recipients of knowledge to do something. We should expect us to build the knowledge because we have all the bases and because everything is new here.
Yeah. Okay, final question. We love to leave our audience with practical advice when they're listening to our conversation the next Monday. What do they do? What is your advice to them? What is the practical starting point for someone who is just getting started? What should they do?
I think that you need to build very small little habits. Like we are working with different companies, much bigger, global. And one of the things that we realize when we work with our clients at Atlas is not about a big boom. It's about the little habits. So for instance, next Monday, instead of starting your day just trying to deal with the email, have a 15-minute break, review your agenda of the day, and review what generative AI would give you as insights to go through your day. And that requires 15 minutes. It does not require more to pause and reflect and have this knowledge in front of you that you are going to build for your meetings, for the activities that you have to do. Do a little exploration with any of the tools that are in your within your toolkit. Ideally, something more that is tuned for HR, but in general, the tools are good. If you just have the Copilot in your Microsoft Teams, if you have ChatGPT, the open, if you have DeepSeek, just ask. I need to go to a relocation meeting for a new software team. Okay, what are the latest trends on relocation for software teams in global companies? And be prepared for that meeting with something else that you will not do. So start building small habits. That will create a change.
That's great. Tiny habits.
Yes.
Wonderful. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. A big thank you to Guillermo for sharing his expertise and deep insights with us. And to our audience, we hope you'll join us at the AI+HI project in 2026. Till then, sign up for our weekly newsletter at shrm.org/AI+HI and see you next week.
SHRM.